My name's Jenny Turner, and I'm a CCI Action member from West Des Moines.
Whoop, whoop.
7 years ago, my husband Joe died from cancer at age 43 when my son was 7. He had diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, an aggressive form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and a type of cancer that is linked to Roundup. Joe used Roundup around our yard. We don't know if that's what caused his cancer, but we do know that there have been hundreds of lawsuits suing Monsanto, who is the maker of Roundup, for causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Bayer also knew about these lawsuits when they bought Monsanto in 2018. Over recent years, a lot of information has come out related to cancer and Roundup, including that Monsanto was ghostwriting and influencing studies that said Roundup was safe, as well as pressuring the Environmental Protection Agency to say Roundup is not harmful and not causing cancer. A good example of this is recently a study that was cited as one of the main pieces of evidence that Roundup was safe was retracted. It was published in 2000, and recently one of the journal's editors said it was ghostwritten by Monsanto, although the authors claimed to be independent at the time. It also ignored evidence that Roundup may be harmful to humans. While that study has been debunked, there's more recent research from 2024 in the journal Frontiers that links pesticides with leukemia, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, bladder, colon, lung, and pancreatic cancers, and highlights that the cancer risk from pesticides in some scenarios matches the risks associated with smoking. Around the world, glyphosate, which is the main ingredient in Roundup, is banned, but in Iowa, it has been advertised as completely safe. One state legislator I talked to last year even went so far as to say he used to drink water out of the containers that had previously had Roundup in it. He realized that, that wasn't such a good thing and voted against the Cancer Gag Act, but some of our elected officials are more interested in protecting Bayer's profits than addressing the very real concerns with pesticide use and cancer in Iowa. This is how we see things at CCI Action. Bayer made a bad business decision. That's why they have been pushing the Cancer Gag Act in many states and nationally. They're trying to stop people from suing them and to stop information on Roundup's harmfulness from coming out in the discovery process. In Iowa, we're second in the nation for cancer rates, and we have the highest rate of new cancers. In addition to my husband, my mother had endometrial cancer, and my brother had a primary bone tumor in his femur, which he had to have replaced with a titanium rod. Too many Iowans have been impacted. It's time for every elected official in Iowa to take a stand on this issue. We need elected officials who will stand up to multinational corporations like Bayer, and I'm going to have Rich talk a little bit.
Okay. Cancer continues to show up in unexpected places. I'd be an example of one of those unexpected places. My name is Rich Gradville. I was raised in Cedar Rapids, but have lived in central Iowa for nearly 40 years. I also come from a very large family with very little, if any, history of cancer. I was diagnosed with bladder cancer 3 years ago next month. Bladder cancer had traditionally been a smoker's cancer, and I've never been a smoker. A year or so into my treatment, I met another gentleman, a little older than me, that had also dealt with bladder cancer and also had never smoked. So thinking this was really quite unusual, at my next treatment with my urologist, I mentioned it to him, and I don't think I'll ever forget my urologist's response. He said, I know that we're in Iowa and we're not supposed to say anything bad about agriculture, but we shouldn't be surprised by these unexpected cancers due to all the agricultural chemicals and waste that are in our water sources. He referred to the fertilizer spill of 265,000 gallons of liquid nitrogen into the East Nishnabotna River. In addition to killing almost all the fish and water life for 60 miles downstream, he was concerned that in the coming years we'll start seeing spikes in cancer rates, especially in those downstream from communities with shallow wells. I'm not sure about the cause of my bladder cancer, but it makes sense to me that it likely has something to do with the water I've been drinking. There are 53 million pounds of pesticides spread across our state every year. So this is to you, Chris. There's more than any other state in the country. As Ag Secretary, what would you do to address Iowans' growing concerns about how chemicals like Roundup are contributing to the alarming rates of cancer in our state.
So firstly, glyphosate, which is the chemical in Roundup, is a regulated parameter under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so what that tells you is that our EPA has known for a long time that there are risks associated to consuming glyphosate in your drinking water. And so someone that says, oh, there's no risk at all, and they'll drink from a container that's previously held glyphosate, they don't know what they're talking about. We've known that there's risks to glyphosate for a long time. Glyphosate did displace some other chemicals that we know were worse, but we also knew when we started GMO crops and using glyphosate that weeds would eventually develop some resistance to it. And so now we're going back to that bad stuff, right? Or the worst stuff. And so we're all exposed to these chemicals in the environment here. And I tend to not want to focus on one particular chemical because all these things can have an additive effect, right? And so when we do studies, we generally are looking at glyphosate or some other chemical in isolation, and we're not really able to look at multiple simultaneous exposures to glyphosate and nitrate in the drinking water and atrazine and all these other things. And so just this system where we're just awash in chemicals, you know, it should not be a surprise to anyone that we have this increased cancer rate, right? And so the current production model has basically been here since the mid-70s. It's been about 50 years now, and these environmental exposures oftentimes don't manifest them immediately in the health effects, and it's a lifetime exposure. Right now, 50 years after this production model, guess what? We have the second highest cancer rate.
Interesting.
And, you know, it shouldn't be a surprise here at all. And so I think the answer here, again, is to try to transition this system to a low input system. Because when we have only 2 crops, chances are most farmers, they're going to need insecticide, or they're going to feel like they need insecticide. They're going to feel like they need herbicide.
Right.
They're going to feel like they need other chemicals. The fungicides now are a big deal. We see them being applied by airplanes. And so again, we need to transition to a low input system where we don't need this stuff.